Now, if you quote the Hastings Center report, the authors were Lindemann and Burkirk, January, February 2008, pages 42 to 51. They did an analysis of the Groningen Protocol. Hastings Center reports. This is supposed to be an ethics report. And it said it is precisely those babies who could continue to live, but whose lives would be wretched in the extreme. What does that mean, wretched in the extreme? What does that mean? And do you know that at birth? Can you see this child born? Can you say this child's life will be wretched to the extreme? Can you actually say that? Who stand in most need of intervention. Intervention is lethal injection, for which the protocol offers guidance. This is the attitude, I think, towards disability. The Groningen Protocol, I believe, this is my point of view. You can argue with me all you want, but it exists to end the lives of infants with disabilities because the cost to society and the parents is deemed too great to allow their lives to continue. It's about cost, and it's also clear in the Groningen Protocol. The protocol, when they define suffering, it's also about future suffering, or possible future suffering, they say. What does it mean, possible future suffering? I think this is eugenic. I clearly look at it that way. They've determined these conditions are now conditions where we will end their lives. Which other conditions will be next? Now, these are important studies. I'm going to give you some information. Melfors and Cohen did a study. It's actually Donna Cohen who was the lead researcher. And you can see it right there, American Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry, 13/211-217, March 2005. And these are suicide experts, okay? So these are not people who are rallying against euthanasia and this is a suicide. They did research on this growing problem of murder-suicide. And what that means is that usually it's the case of the husband killing his wife. Usually that's what it means, and then he commits suicide. And there's this growing number of people who are doing this. And they looked at cases in Florida. Now the reason they chose Florida is because Florida has a uniform nature of how they do all their, what do you call it when someone's died and you analyze the bodies and everything? The autopsy reports, they have a uniform process where some states don't have a uniform process. So therefore they always will have the same information to follow by. And what do they conclude? Well, many of these cases were reported as a loving couple where one spouse kills the other spouse for reasons of compassion. And we hear this in the news. Wasn't it terrible that this man felt he had to kill his wife, who he loved so dearly? The study found that in nearly all of these cases, the spouse who does the act usually had a history of abuse, and resistance marks were usually found in the victim. So the next time you see a thing in the media or on your Google alert about, a homicide, suicide, like I get these Google alerts and I get a lot of these stories, and often the media just presents it as, the neighbor said they look like such a loving couple. But when you actually analyze it, were they actually a loving couple? It's usually a person with a lot of control problems who ends up killing his spouse and then killing himself. But Vanderlee, now this was a very interesting study, and it's you can see it in Clinical Oncology 23, 6607, it was in 2005 to 6612. Now why is this important? Well, Vanderlee, this is a Netherlands study, and Vanderlee, the researcher, was an oncologist, cancer physician, and she believed that the reason people in the Netherlands were choosing euthanasia as a suicide was not based on depression, because that's always been what our studies have found. It's usually based highly on depression. But she said it's based on well-considered decisions and not depression in the Netherlands. So she puts it right in her study. That's what she believed, and she was trying to prove that. But what did she find? The study concluded, to our surprise, we found that a depressed mood was associated with more requests. Patients with a depressed mood were associated with a 4 times greater risk of requesting euthanasia. This is important because this is a doctor from the other side trying to prove the opposite, but finds that the allegations that depression is the major reason for this were actually true. Well, lo and behold, Linda Ganzini did a study in Oregon. Ganzini is a researcher, a palliative care researcher in particular, but she's a researcher in Oregon, and she's not particularly on our side again. And she found that 15 of 58 people, so what she did is she did a study where people who had requested assisted suicide. So these are people, they're not people who just have cancer or something or are dying. These are people who asked for assisted suicide and agreed to be part of her study. There's 58 of them. And she then assessed them and had professional assessments done of them. And her study found that 15 of the 58 who had requested suicide were depressed. And you may say, well, what's the point? Now, you've just proved Vanderly says it, now Ganzini says it. Well, the fact is in that case study came out in 2008. In 2007, there was 49 assisted suicide deaths in Oregon. I ask you the question. I should tell you more information. The law in Oregon says that if there's any thought that maybe this person is depressed or experiencing mental issues, that they must be assessed by a psychological, psychiatric assessment. They must be. Early on, half of the assisted suicide people who were requested assisted suicide were assessed. In the very beginning, half of them were. How many of them in 2007 were assessed of the 49 who died? None of them. I already have it there. Yeah. I was trying to ask you a question, but I had it right on this one. Right? Now, if you got that one wrong, you really had you were wrong. None of them were. Well, this is important because Ganzini has taken this independent study. These are people who have asked for assisted suicide. She's independently then done assessments of them. She's found that 15 of 58, 26%. Now, what's interesting, you'll find it's very interesting how this whole thing works together. This was published, and the article that went with it. So what happened is the journal that published this article asked Vanderly to make comment on this article. And she did. And what she said is, oh yeah, we found about the same, about, a quarter of our people were actually depressed. Absolutely, yes, yes. So nothing's new, she said. But she said, well, what does that matter? Because Vanderly supports euthanasia and assisted suicide. Her response is, well, now that you've actually proven without a doubt that this is highly connected to depression, her response now is, okay, so now you've proven it, but what does that matter? I guess they appear to be lucid. New development, Royal Society of Canada. I want you to say this to you just because you guys go to university and this is supposed to be a place of higher learning. And we're supposed to be involved with fair and equal knowledge, right? That's what it's supposed to be about, right? Well, this Royal Society of Canada, many of your professors will be members of this. There's 2,000 members across Canada. These are professors in Canada who are members of the Royal Society of Canada. It's supposed to be a place of where higher learning people come together. They've just appointed this committee on end-of-life decision-making. And who have they appointed? Well, I put the names there for you. They may not mean much to you, but you do see that name, Jocelyn Downing, right? I already mentioned about her. Well, this Udo guy, he wrote an article decrying how monotheistic religions are denying him the right to die. Do you think he's in favor or opposed? Jocelyn Downing wrote the book Dying Justice about legalizing euthanasia in Canada. How do you think she stands? Sheila McLean, now she's from Scotland, so this is an international community. She wrote the book The Case for Assisted Suicide. So that's 3 of 6. Johan van Delden is a pro-euthanasia ethicist and another. There's 4 of 6 who are appointed are radically supporting euthanasia, and this is supposed to be an independent study. So you can see it. Now this report is supposed to come out in the spring of 2011, and the Globe and Mail and the rest of them and CBC News, they're going to say, the think tank, these great, educated people have come up with this independent study for us. Bull.